Meeple Nation Podcast, episode 349. Root. I am Root. I don't know. Andy said it earlier. I thought it sounded funny in my head. Sounded less funny coming out of my mouth.
I like it.
Welcome, citizens of Meeple Nation. For the next 30 minutes, sit back and enjoy.
Meeple Nation Podcast is sponsored by GameToppersLLC.com. Check them out. They're great gifts. They're great opportunities to change your space from an alright game table space to an amazing space. Definitely check them out. GameToppersLLC.com.
You know, I think I might have to upgrade my Minecraft. Thinking I might have to buy another mat. Get the Viking mat for Christmas for myself.
The Viking mat does look pretty cool.
Thing looks amazing.
And it would go really good with your Champions of Midgard.
Champions of Midgard, Reavers of Midgard. There's several games I have that would go really well with that game mat. I might have to treat myself.
I approve.
Welcome to Meeple Nation. We are your hosts. I am Andy Holiday.
I am Nathan Howard.
I am Dave Holiday.
I am Logan Howard.
Logan finds it so humorous how we each introduce ourselves uniquely.
Well, and we do it different than each other, too.
That is true. Good point, Dave. Thanks for pointing that out.
So, over the past couple of weeks, we've been narrowing down our topic. We've been talking about hand management games. A couple weeks ago, it was just in general. Lots of games we discussed. Last week, we each picked one game to talk about. And this week, we're talking about Root. So, Root is a game for 2 to 4 players, played in 60 to 90 minutes, designed by Wehrle and published by Later Games. This is a game where you're trying to decide the fate of the forest as woodland factions fight for contrasting goals. It is a game of adventure and war. In the base game, there are 4 individual factions. The nefarious Marquis Descartes. There is the Vagabond, is his own faction. There is the Eyrie, the bird faction. And there is the Woodland Alliance. Each faction is a different animal in the kingdom of animals. You have the cats, the mice, the raccoon is the vagabond, and the Eyrie are birds. Each faction is very asymmetrical in their abilities, in their gameplay, in every way.
So when I opened up this box and I looked in there and I started to separate the pieces, I'm like, this is great. They missed shipping me half the stuff. So I was going to start looking to how I would reach out to the manufacturer and say, hey, I'm missing pieces. Because you look at the amount of warriors that the cats have is different than the amount of warriors that the birds have. And that's different than the amount of warriors that the Woodland Alliance has. And then the Vagabond only has 1 pawn. And I'm like, this can't be right. Looked through it and trying to find parts. Got frustrated with it. Can't believe this is missing stuff. But the asymmetrical setup is so extreme in this that I think this is what really shines, in my opinion, for this game. But carry on, Dave.
Totally. The asymmetry here, it stands out. Most of the time when you have an asymmetrical part of a game, it's printed on your card that tells you what's a little bit different about your people than somebody else's people, right? This game, it's from the number of tokens that you have, the meeples, the
way you play the game.
Everything.
How you score points,
right.
Everything.
How you can take actions, everything is different. And that's pretty cool. I think it's pretty cool that they put something together. They had to have spent a ton of time playtesting this to make sure that things are balanced the way that they want them balanced.
Yeah.
And that's the one downside to asymmetrical games is if they didn't do a good job balancing out the game, it makes it obvious that there's a certain race or a certain character that you want to play because they definitely have an advantage. And we kind of saw that a little bit in this game, but I think they corrected that, and we noticed that in the second game we played with turn order, because it's the first player to 30 points. First player to reach that, so if first player reaches it, then you don't get equal number of turns.
When we first read through each of the factions and what they were doing and the abilities they have, I went through my mind. I was like, okay, it sounds like these guys are the best, then these guys, then these guys, then these guys, right? And I didn't put it together until we got through that second play. And I was like, oh, okay, yeah. Turn order matches the opposite of what I felt was best people to be or whatever. Even to the way you score points, it's different, each faction. And I thought that was really cool. And then each of the expansions adds more factions. We haven't played those yet, but I'm looking forward to that.
I'm looking forward to exploring this game quite a bit. One thing that I found really kind of unique is when I'm going through reading the rules suggest you go through the walking through route, which is an extended example of how to play.
Right. It tells you exactly what to do.
Turn
for your
for turn tells
two
you what to
turns.
do.
Right.
Yeah.
It tells you roll the dice, but you got this result.
Yeah. And all that is just to kind of give you an example of how to play through it. It also suggested to make sure that somebody had read through the rules so that at least one person could touch back on the finer points of the game as you go on. As we were playing through the walkthrough, there was some frustrations, right? We're like, I don't want to do that. I want to do my own thing. And the walkthrough was explaining, maybe this doesn't make sense, but we're doing this so that you can get the initial experience.
Okay, you're being nice to the rules. It doesn't say, this doesn't make sense. It's like, you might think this is not a good idea to do on your first turn, and you are right. But we're doing it anyway.
Well, see, it might not make sense.
I think this walking through route that they did is very important. Without that, I think it would have been really difficult to figure out how to play the game.
For sure. And at the end of the walkthrough, it says, okay, you can go on and play, or you can reset. We chose to continue to play through it. So we had maybe kind of a tainted experience that first time, but it was really good to give us that experience, to give us that opportunity to discover how the characters, and not necessarily the characters, but how the factions played out, the tools that they used, and the way that they used those mechanics individually. It has a very steep learning curve. You're given a player mat that has a whole bunch of information on it, and that information is completely different to somebody else. And so that first game for all of us, we couldn't just say, hey, what does this mean?
Right.
Because there wasn't that shared knowledge where, well, I've played this, so I can tell you what this means. The second game we played, that changed quite a bit, right? Because Andy, Dave, you played the same factions. Logan and I swapped factions, which for me I thought was super beneficial because there was things that I was doing and Logan was learning his faction as well as teaching me my faction. And there was some of that trade back, right? There was highlights that I was pointing out to Logan to make sure that he would remember as well. But there's still nuances. There's so much to discover with this game that I think in the plays that we've played, we're nowhere near having firm handle on this game.
Yeah.
Well, that definitely increases the replayability of this game.
For sure.
Just the fact that you had a completely different game, just switching your faction completely changed your game. So the replayability is extremely high. But on the downside, you essentially have to learn a different part of the game every single time you play if you're going to play a different faction that you have not played, or especially if one of the other players haven't played it. Like you had Logan to help you kind of learn that faction. If you don't have that, then even though you may have played the game several times, you're learning something new in a different aspect of how to play that game.
You're almost learning a new game.
Almost, essentially,
Yeah.
just about learning a new game.
I think you almost are learning a new game because the Erie?
Eerie.
Either way.
The Birds is what Nathan and I played. So I played it the first time, he played it the second time. I actually think is to plan your turns out is like one of the most complicated things because it's literally building a tower of cards as their turns. Because you have these decrees that you put cards down every single turn, you add at least one card. And if you can't do an entire action, your little nation of birds go into anarchy and you have to start all over, and it just costs you victory points, and it's horrible. Just to be able to try and plan out, so like, okay, what am I going to do this turn? Okay, well now I need to start planning next turn. As I'm doing this turn, what's going to happen so that way I can still do these things.
Leads back into that. You play it a couple of times, you get that more firm foundation in those mechanics. We both picked the same leader in the Eerie faction to begin with. Maybe that wasn't such a great idea. To be able to discover that and to learn that strategy and say, okay, maybe more important later on to be able to produce 2 warriors instead of 1 on a recruit action. Is it better to take one of those other leaders at a different point in the game to become more advantageous to get you more points? And the same thing with the Woodland Alliance that both Logan and I played. How they score points and how they upheave the game is crazy. There can be a clearing where there's a ton of warriors, and then all of a sudden the Woodland Alliance can come in and say, hey, there's an upheaval, and all of those warriors are gone. There could have been 15 warriors there, and all of a sudden both the cats and the birds think they got a handle on things, and here comes the Woodland Alliance and says, peace, love, and harmony, and all those warriors go away.
No one says how they go away.
It's a revolt.
Had a whole party and had lots of tamales and lots of pot pies.
There you go.
Back up just a little bit real quickly. I want to get your initial thoughts on this game because this game is very, very unique just based on the asymmetry alone. And there's other reasons it's unique too. For me, we talked about the rules. We explained everything. We're getting ready to go. I wanted to love this game because it has a lot of things that I love all rolled into one. It was new, first of all. The asymmetry, the hand management. There's a lot of pieces, at least for my faction. Engine building, dice. For me, there was a lot to look forward to.
I was overwhelmed at first, trying to, where you go read the instructions and then try to teach people and to try to teach everybody the first time for their faction to have a handle on that. I was so overwhelmed. I didn't want to teach the game. But the walkthrough was actually helpful. It took a lot of that burden off of me so that it gave everybody the opportunity to read their own boards, but still gave them a soft overview of each of the factions. I thought that was really good.
I think I want to love this game more than I do right now. And it's not that I have like negative feelings about this game. I just have mixed feelings about playing it. Maybe I didn't play the right faction yet. I do love that everybody has a different play style, but then I think what we decided after the second playthrough is that Andy playing as the Vagabond is that they have like the biggest edge towards victory. Unless everybody's committed towards tearing down the Vagabond, then it's not a very even game. You have to be very aggressive towards each other. Otherwise, it just runs away.
I think that you nailed it right there. It's not a complacent game, right? You have to be aggressive towards each other.
Yeah, it's not just, I'll just find my niche and I'll just get victory points up there close to them. No, you have to be aggressive towards each other.
Unless you're the Vagabond. And then you can find your niche and not be aggressive towards anybody.
But the Vagabond still fights sometimes.
You can. You can, but... And you do get points you get a lot of points if you can be friends with everybody, because you share, as you're sharing cards with people, you're talking 2 points every time you do that. If you've increased them on your relationship track, you can get far more points by being friends than you can by being enemies. I mean, you can, I guess, by taking enemy troops off, and you get points for that as well. And maybe that would be a strategy to try, because I didn't try that. So maybe there are a lot of points going that route.
So while this game had a lot of things that I love, also involved that which I do not love. And you guys just talked a little bit about it, direct conflict. I hate being attacked. I hate attacking. For me, it's just uncomfortable, and I generally don't like it. With the faction that I was always involved in the conflict because the cats start in almost every clearing, with one warrior in almost every clearing. The only way they are successful is if they have a lot of clearings and are able to build their buildings in those clearings. And so in order to build a building, you have to rule that clearing, meaning you have to have more pieces than anybody else there. Unless you're the birds, then you just have to tie for the most. But as the cats, you have to have the sawmills in a lot of places because that produces wood, and that's what you need to build your other buildings, and that's how you score points, is by building. And in our first playthrough, Logan was the birds, and his thing was I have to move and attack somebody. And well, guess who is going to get attacked? Me, right? And I just happened to build sawmills at all these places where he's going and attacking. So I was never able to generate wood in order to build. So for me, it was just, I got creamed. There was no way I was going to win that game.
But you took second place both times.
No, I didn't. First game, I lost completely. I knew what was coming. I knew I wasn't going to be able to win. And so the only chance I had was playing that one dominance card and hoping to maintain dominance in 3 clearings.
And he won the second game.
The second game, I actually won by quite a bit, 5 points or so.
I would have beaten you if I would have had to be able to take a turn. I was going to score so many points. Anyway,
the second game I did win. I completely changed up my strategy because...
You didn't follow the walkthrough.
Yeah, because
you had your own strategy.
Right? But I knew I had to stay away from you being the birds taking over all my places, and I knew the Woodland Alliance was just going to come. If I had a bunch of things on a spot, they would just come through and just wipe everything out. So whenever he came through and placed that first token to get influence or whatever it's called, my next action is I'm moving everybody out of there. I'm sacrificing the buildings that I have there. I'm moving all my warriors somewhere else. But, the gameplay is very different depending on who you are because of, again, coming back to that asymmetry. And I've never seen asymmetry done the way this game does it.
Yeah, it is just phenomenal the way that it's done. Because absolutely every bit, you have the same 3 phases, but everybody's phase, how they manage and do that phase is going to be completely different, which shines for me. And then you introduce some of the expansions. You introduce some of those other factions. And like you mentioned, we haven't touched those yet. That is something that I'm personally looking forward to. Then there's some solo variant. And if you're playing with less than 4 people, you can introduce some of these autonomous players that will take turns. That's the other thing that I thought was really cool is, depending on the factions that you're playing, the way the board gets set up. The cats, they get to go first. They always go first. And they put their keep. They put their keep out. And they have to put it in one of the 4 corners, which means that the birds, if they're playing, they have to put their first roost in the opposite corner. Then the vagabond starts at the bridge. The way the vagabond moves is completely unique and different. Then the Woodland Alliance starts with nothing on the board. How the game evolves and how the game develops as you play, I find fascinating. Super excited to discover more about this game. And with the expansions, that gives us some more opportunities. And also ups the player count, so you can play with, I believe you can play with 6 people with the River Folk expansion, which is also nice because for our group, that allows us to expand that to our regular game night instead of our recording game night to get more experience with the game. So I'm looking forward to that in itself.
Yeah, definitely kudos to the game designers because I can't even imagine trying to get everything balanced, and especially for how asymmetrical everything is. Incredible. They were able to pull that off and pull it off so well. And I'm with you. I think it'll be a lot of fun to pull out those expansions and try some of the other abilities that the expansions will have.
And that's one of the things I think with this game, we talked about how Andy and I both played our same faction. First 2 times we played, you and Logan swapped. For me, there's just so much replayability based on both of those things, right? Like,
for sure.
Playing the same faction. Like I said, I changed quite a bit what I was doing from game 1 to game 2. And I could probably do it again in game 3.
Not only that, it depends on what other players end up playing too. If you bring in some of the expansions, even though you play the same faction, if 2 people play different factions that we haven't been in the game yet, that totally changes your game experience.
Absolutely.
Well, it totally changes it just from me playing the Woodland Alliance from Nathan playing the Woodland Alliance, because we have that different idea going in of what we're going to do, so that it just changes what you were going to do just that way.
Mm-hmm. I guess when it comes down to it, I look forward to trying the cats again. But at the same time, I really want to try a bunch of these other factions as well. And I don't know if that was their intent behind doing it the way they did, but they hooked me that way.
For sure.
I want to play a bunch of different ones.
I believe that was the intention behind only playing with the base game, was to limit your choices.
Yeah, for us, we didn't want to give you so many choices. Give you a week to prepare. I think you're absolutely right. You have that opportunity to do a faction and to learn that faction and still not have it mastered. It's going to take you several plays to have that worked out. And going back to what Andy said, depending on which other factions are included in the game, the player count changes everything about that. And then you have the opportunity to explore a new faction. Exploring that new faction is a whole new experience. And with different factions that are out there, tons of depth to go digging into this game. Way excited about that. So what are your final thoughts? We've talked a lot about this game. Andy, what do you...
So this is probably not a game I would get to the table very often, at my game night anyway. So it's probably not one I would maybe buy and waste valuable shelf space, because that's getting to be more and more limited as I've been buying more and more games.
Just buy a new, bigger house.
I've been there, done that, so I've got to build shelves now. But I think it's just the fact that I wouldn't get it to the table as often, given who comes to our game night, and especially with my kids, I think they would have a hard time wrapping their heads around it.
This is a game I will never take home. My wife, I would get her to play it once, and I don't think I could get her to play games again for a month.
This is definitely a gamer's game. There's no doubt about it. But I'm glad that you have it, because I enjoyed when we played it, and I want to play it again, but it's not one I personally would purchase and have at my house.
Logan?
It's one that I'm looking forward to exploring more. Because as I said earlier, I kind of have mixed feelings where I want to like the game more than I actually have so far. And I think it's just because maybe I haven't found my faction
Your play of choice, your
Yeah.
your style of play.
We were looking at one that was like lizard people. Maybe lizard people are my game style of that game, and after that I'll be good to go. But I look forward to trying to find that.
I look forward to playing both factions I played again and again. I want to be able to master and be an actual threat playing the Woodland Alliance. And I want to be able to master the decree of the birds, to be able to plan ahead, say, okay, this is going to benefit me the most. I need to be able to take these actions for sure each time and be able to take advantage of those. And at the same time, I'm anxious to play the Vagabond. I'm anxious to play the cat. Just to experience the same game in a new way excites me tremendously.
And it's like getting 4 or 5 games in one game.
Exactly.
It's great.
The replayability, the variability of it just is exciting to me. Apparently, I'm very excited about this game. Dave, what do you think?
One of the reasons that this game didn't really take off for me was the hand management, which normally I love hand management, but with my faction, it was a really slow process. Drawing cards, I drew 1 card a turn. You get to the point where you could draw 2. I think it'd be really difficult to get to the point where you could draw 3. And then you have a hand limit of 5, I believe.
Mm-hmm.
It slowed down the variability of my options, being that faction. But I think that would also change with faction. But since it took away options, it really limited the management of the hand as far as that goes. Also, the direct conflict for me is, like I said, not one of my favorites. But the fact that every time you play this game, it can be almost like a new game, that for me is one of my maybe favorite things. And so, like I said, I'll come back for more for that.
Until you get a complete...
It may just be until like, I've tried this, I've scratched that itch, whatever, right?
Yeah.
Like it could, but for me, new games are such a big deal that I'll keep coming back because while it feels like a new game.
You talk about the hand management, which we actually probably didn't discuss very much in this game. But the hand management, how the birds, the Eerie, how they have to manage their hands. The cards that they have, the way they set out their decree, because they set out the decree, and each turn they have to take these set actions. And like Logan said, if you can't take any part of those actions, then you go into revolt. Is it revolt?
No.
Disarray.
You go into disarray, and you have to wipe everything out, and you lose points, and you have to start over. The Woodland Alliance, completely different. The Woodland Alliance is trying to get supporters, and they want to get supporters onto the board, and so they're managing that hand completely different. They're wanting to dump cards from their hand into their supporter pool. They're wanting to, anytime one of the opponents move into an area where they have an outpost, they want those opponents to get those cards to add to their support pool. Just completely different management. And I can't speak to the cats or the vagabonds since I haven't played either of those yet. But just the hand management in the game, everything about this game really, really kind of excites me.
It's like what Dave was saying, was that it's super frustrating because you only draw so many cards. So one of the early ways that you get a lot of victory points is you craft items that the Vagabond buys from you. So when he buys those cards from you, he gives you cards, which is super helpful. And then you get the victory points for creating the cards. But you can only do that if you have those cards in your hand too. And so you only get so many cards. And you only get so many cards per turn. And so if you don't have any of those cards to craft, then you're just out of luck. And you're not just getting those extra influx of cards from the Vagabond.
Well, I'm looking forward to putting this game on my 10 for 10 next year, I think. How do you guys feel about that? You excited to play it 10 times, Dave?
I don't know if I can go 10. No, I don't know if I'll be excited for 10. I'm excited, like I said, I'm excited to play it more.
I'm excited to talk more about your 10 for 10.
I was wrong on Thunderstone. The first 40 or so plays on Thunderstone, I really didn't like it. But we played it almost every week here. And I was like, okay, I guess we're playing this again. And eventually I liked it. This game, I like it more than I liked Thunderstone at first. And again, I like the newness of it every time. I could see myself playing it and enjoying it.
This is a game I could play 10 times.
Yeah, I think we'll easily play this 10 times. With being able to go from 4 to 6 people, easily see us playing it 10 times. Next year gives us the chance to really kind of delve into each of these factions. I'm excited about it.
So that is Root.
A game about roots.
Not I Am, but that is.
I Am about roots?
Until next time.
We'll see you in the forest, making things go your way.
Are you sure about the forest? You kind of had the little inflection there, like question mark.
I think he was.